40% fat, 25 to 30% protein, and the rest carbohydrates seems to be the best for fertility. So some studies showed that just shifting, because a lot of women do, even if they're eating healthy, and I'm sure you'll see this, if like, oh, and I don't think everybody needs to be off gluten or dairy or soy necessarily to improve their fertility. Everybody's body is different again. But in my book, Yes, You Can Get Pregnant, I talked about how gluten and dairy can impact things. And I really think it's also the pesticide load in those, and then whether or not we can digest them. But a lot of them won't come to me and they're like, oh, I'm gluten and dairy free and I haven't touched soy and I'm still not getting pregnant. And so then I'll look and I'll say, well, give me a food diary. Let me see. And I look at what they're eating, and their carb load is heavy.
Right.
Even if it's like good quality carbs, they're up at like 40, 50% carbs, and their protein is low, 20% maybe. And then maybe the rest is in there as fat, or they're too low on fat. A lot of women still do like low fat milk or, like skim cheese sticks and stuff like that. And fat is fertility's best friend.
Yep.
We know that from a hormone perspective, right? Cholesterol is like the master of it all. And even Chinese medicine with like the same thing of like the juiciness, like to us as we age, our typically yin declines, we dry out, right? We see that in like menopause, it gets drier, it gets hotter in there. There's more anxiety, there's more heat, hot flashes, vaginal dryness. That's the opposite of what we want to get pregnant, right? We want like more juiciness, moisture. Exactly. Yes. And sometimes that too is women being too skinny, right? That we know fat cells store estrogen. So sometimes it's just like getting them more plump, that kind of like voluptuous look usually lends itself to fertility. I tend to see like a BMI closer to like a 22 is where it's like the sweet spot for fertility.
I tell women that all the time. They'll come in with these BMIs of 17 and 18. I'm like, our BMI needs to at least be 21 and can't be over 30. Like that seems to be the sweet spot, for fertility for sure. So
so it's like, and I love looking at the data and the research and also seeing what I see clinically, and then like kind of going back to my Chinese medicine roots where it was just this like basic, like you ate in the seasons, you ate a variety of colorful vegetables. And that's the other thing too, that I would see in these food diaries. I do recommend like 6 to 8 servings of vegetables a day. It's hard to hit, you got to really focus on it. Most women are getting 2 to 3 max, right? So talk about antioxidant load. So it's like, you can't out supplement a crappy diet. So they might be taking like all the acai berry in the world, but like, if you're not getting your greens in, you're not really supporting your liver, your detox pathways, so things are getting gummed up in there.
Right.
And you make that shift and you often see fertility outcomes improve. And then there's the other piece that is harder to, I was going to say quantify, but also harder to really approach, is the mental emotional piece. So we know safety is a huge piece when it comes to healthy ovulation and fertility. And so by safety, I don't just mean that like you're not living in a war zone, and that might not even be the case. We know women in war zones get pregnant. It's more like safety. Does your body have everything it needs? And does it feel secure in there, or is it constantly under attack? So that could be, maybe there's like an inflammatory disease or an autoimmune condition, but it could also be just chronic stress, like that chronic fight or flight. We know just burns out the adrenals. That'll affect the DHEA and the testosterone, which completely affects the egg quality and folliculogenesis, right? So we know that from a Western perspective, and from like Chinese medicine perspective, we just are like, your body doesn't feel like it's got enough. Like to us in Chinese medicine, fertility comes from an overflow of qi and blood. Like I got so much, you know what I mean? My body's got all the things it needs to do. And I have so much that I can make another human, because it's a huge task.
Not from an empty tank. Super women are listening to this, because so many of them think that they can will themselves into fertility. I think that's a big one. Like, well, I want it, it's going to happen, and I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and therefore it should happen on this timeline. But so many people are working from an empty gas tank. So I think that's such a great point, that we've got to fill up if we want to create more life and all that other stuff.
And I always say too, I'm not, much to what people probably see on social media, I'm not in it for the positive pregnancy test. I'm in it to help, like probably similar mission to you, like help women realize their true power so they can be the mothers this world needs, right? It's like, I want you back in your power, feeling, and the baby is the cherry on top. Like the baby comes from that space.